morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hawk Blogger. And here we are on a Pagliacci presented Robert Mays Monday. And Robert, first of all, welcome to the show. Good to see you. I would ask you how you are doing, but I think I already probably know. So I think Bears fans and Seahawks fans are having a little bit of a tug of war today about who is more traumatized by what they witnessed yesterday. Where are you as a Bears fan after what you saw transpire yesterday?
It certainly wasn't good, and it certainly wasn't enjoyable on multiple fronts. I mean, you could talk about the Hail Mary and the way the game ended. My biggest preoccupation is with how the offense looked for the first three quarters of that game after really rolling over the last three games that they played, considering they played terrible teams. Mm-hmm. So I'm not feeling great, but I think the entire silver lining with this Bears season is you can always come back to it's year one of a new quarterback. It's year one of a rookie quarterback. So it doesn't have to all be fixed right now. There are some things that are creeping up in terms of long-term potential and just what this team looks like over the next couple of years that I think are hard to ignore when they have outings like this. But at the same time, there's a little bit of a house money feeling because this was always going to be, it's all about progress this year. It's all about where you're at by the end of the year. So if there are some dips and there's some detours over the course of that path, that is okay. And that's kind of what yesterday felt like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that's something Seahawks fans can relate to in that it is year one of a new coaching staff and new scheme on both sides of the ball. And so, there's some grace being given for that. And it is absolutely something people are assessing, looking at where they are at the end of the year. Are they closer to where you want them to be than where they started? And this has been schizophrenic. I mean, the Seahawks season, whenever it feels like there's even an inkling of reason to believe that they are building towards something and that they have something to, to basically, I don't know if rely might be strong, but at least that you can think might be a strength of this team, it all goes away in the blink of an eye the next week. And this game yesterday, they didn't leave you a lot. Even if you're a professional coper, there was not a lot of cope to be found in that game. What did you see in that Seahawks performance?
It was unfortunate just because they really got pushed around, I think, on both sides of the ball. That was the feeling that I had in that game. If you watch the way that the Bills were able to assert themselves on the ground from the start, and we talked about it on our show last night, 8 yards, 9 yards, 11 yards, 12 yards, 18 yards. That's what the run game felt like all day for Buffalo. And on the flip side, the Seahawks couldn't run the ball at all. And you just think about what good teams feel like right now in the NFL. And I think what good teams have felt like over the last couple of years. And it's these offenses that can really move the ball efficiently no matter how you ask them to do that. The Chiefs have become that sort of team over the last couple of years. The Niners are obviously that sort of team with the way that they could run the ball with McCaffrey. And I think the Bills transition to being that sort of team after not being one for years. Now, if you look back at the 2020, 2021 Bills, these are some of the most high-flying offenses we had in the NFL, but they couldn't run the ball when they needed to when we got deeper into the season. And I think their transition to this sort of team that says, we're fine rolling 6 offensive linemen out there. Screw all this 11, 10 personnel spread out stuff that we used to do. We're not that sort of team anymore. We can play however we want to. So I think you had a matchup yesterday between a team that's in that place and a team that is very much still finding itself on the way to getting there.
Well, one of the things that's been fascinating to kind of observe, because I think that's a great point, is you're seeing some organizations sense that shift and invest in that shift. Sean McVay is another example of they had a, very much a passing centric offense. It was a very different style of offense, and they spent a ton of money and draft capital on their offensive line over the last 2 off seasons and have become a power running team in addition to, other aspects. Is that just the state of the NFL right now, that essentially are we seeing, is it really a shift to where how effective you can be in running the ball is that becoming as important as how effective you are through the air?
I don't think it's as important because the quarterback is always gonna be the most important player on any offense. But I think being able to attack teams that wanna play you a certain way has become it's become necessary. It's a necessary component of having a good offense in the NFL. If you think about the best offenses in the league, let's say over the last 2 years, every single one of them can run the ball on their terms. The Lions are one of those teams. The Ravens are obviously one of those teams. The Eagles, when they've really been rolling, have been one of those teams over the last couple of years. And the Rams last year are a very good example. And so I think that the Rams are really useful if we're trying to find a comparison point for how other teams can seek this out. The Rams did invest in their offensive line a little bit last offseason, but it was almost a happy accident when they got to the place they did by the end of the season. Like they traded nothing for Kevin Dotson, and then he signed a massive contract extension this offseason because of the way he played. I think more than anything, the lesson from this Rams team and how they've become the team that they are when everything is clicking and everything is at full strength is the emphasis they put on running the ball. In the offseason, they said, this is a priority for us. We are going to be a team that has a well-rounded complementary run game. And I think the reason that that is necessary, that sort of process, is because you need to tinker with your run game to see what works. Like, I don't think the Rams came into last year and said, we're going to be this duo double team downhill run team. I think they found that as they figured out who their personnel was. But unless you're making a conscious effort to engage in that process, you're never going to eventually get the results.
Well, obviously the Rams had a big, resilient moment in their season this past week and Thursday, beating the Vikings. Big game for them. But kind of building on your point there, Robert, I think a lot of folks think about you got to find your franchise quarterback. That's the key. That's what wins everything. It feels much more like if you look throughout history, football is won, games are won a lot of different ways. And the more ways you can win, the more chances you have to be a championship team. And so it's not about, you have to be the best passing team or the best rushing team or the best rushing defense or the best passing defense. But if you can be what you need to be in any given week, your chances of victory are significantly higher. And so when you become essentially for the Seahawks, you are a very one-sided offense. And even that had some weakness yesterday in passing. And defense, what do you have? Like that's now become a question. You hope that they were a great pressure team. They were only able to get 11 pressures yesterday in that game, and they had everybody that you could want available to them.
Yeah, I think that the way that Buffalo was able to establish itself up front, both on the ground and in pass protection, was alarming when you think about where this team has spent a lot of its resources, right? Byron Murphy is a first-round pick. Leonard Williams is a second-round pick plus a contract extension. Boye Mafe was a second-round pick. They paid to get Draymond Jones. This is where the investment on this team has happened more than any other position group. They traded a fourth-round pick for Ernest Jones 4 days ago, and the results just weren't there yesterday. And the Bills kept going to this play over and over and over again. And I was going to tweet out a compilation of them because I just think that they clearly saw something where they were in 11 personnel. They had Matt Collins into the formation on the right side, and then they sent number 89, whose name I can't remember, in quick motion over and over and over again to the left side. And so they had essentially everyone blocked up to that side, with the backside safety and the backside corner as the only two guys who were not accounted for on the play. And when you combine that with the movement they were getting on some of those double teams, they were just washing out the entire side of that defense over and over and over again. And if there's a team that feels like we can just keep going back to the well over and over with the same play, that's troubling. And I think that speaks to some of the structural issues going on with this defense right now and where offenses feel like they can consistently get after them.
In the blame pie game, how much of that do you put on the personnel? How much of it do you put on the scheme? How much do you put it on the play calling?
It's a really good question. I mean, I probably put it on personnel first and foremost, because there's no scheme that can prevent you from getting blown off the ball 5 yards when you get double teamed. Mm-hmm. And that was happening a lot yesterday. I think Byron Murphy has a chance to be a really good player in this league, but he was getting displaced pretty often during that game yesterday when the Bills wanted to run the ball. You know, you have a rookie, you have a linebacker that's been in the system for 4 days. I'm sure he's not playing with a lot of confidence. I mean, there are things you can point to that you say, all right, maybe this can get better. But I think that it's probably a little bit of everything when you look at the final result of it. And I know that's not a satisfying answer, but I think that speaks to how hard it is to potentially fix.
Obviously, there's a lot of conversation about coaching right now in Seattle. It's a new coaching staff, and this is a situation now where you've had 5-6 weeks in a row of just really bad run defense. And different reasons maybe in different situations, but it's just been bad. And Mike Macdonald just did his radio show this morning, and you know, he's understandably not in particularly good spirits, but it's hard. I don't know if that I've ever seen a run defense this consistently bad at this consistent level of badness in a while. So it's hard for me not to look at the coaching and say, like, can you not be dedicating more people to run defense? Is there really nothing else you can do here? Is there enough of a priority being put on stopping the run? And it sounds like from your perspective, it might not be like as simple as, you know, let's actually dedicate more emphasis to stopping the run.
So on James Cook's runs yesterday, I was looking up while you were talking. 65% of his runs went into a light box yesterday. On those runs, he had 11 carries for 77 yards. So he's averaging 7 yards a carry. And about 64% of those runs were successful per Next Gen Stats. That's just not tenable. Like, you just can't live that way over the course of an NFL game. You're going to get bled out over 4 quarters. The problem is, sometimes it's not as simple as saying, well, let's just get an extra hat down in the box. Because if that's not how you want to play, then before the game even starts, you're chasing your tail in terms of who you want to be defensively and what your overall plan should look like. So I don't know what the right answer is. I truly don't, because if you just want to say, let's walk Julian Love down into the box, one, is Julian Love really that sort of player, right? Is that how we want to be using him? He's Rayshon Jenkins, maybe. Maybe that's the guy that you would potentially do that with. But I think on a personnel level right now, they don't really have a thumping safety you feel good, you know, trotting down there, and it's going to make a difference. And if you do, is it going to leave you too susceptible to explosives on the back end? So, you know, the fact that Mike Macdonald doesn't have any answers right now, I think makes me feel a little bit better that I don't have any answers for what is ailing this defense.
Well, and the concerning part is if it is personnel, you know, Leonard Williams isn't going anywhere. You just signed him to a big deal. Jaron Reed, you could replace him. You know, he's on the end of his contract if you think that's the problem. Draymond Jones, you potentially get out of that contract next year. But, you know, Byron Murphy's obviously he's your first round pick, and you have some reason to be excited about him, but this was a tough game. Maybe it's the Jonathan Hankins piece, like nose tackle. Like, that was a glaring absence in the plan this season. I don't know, man. It's that's the part that's frustrating is where do you even start? Like, where do you even start to say, okay, we've put all this investment in this, and that's one of the main areas of problem. Does that start to point at the personnel department? Like, do you start to say, okay, we've got the wrong people making the choices about who's coming into the building?
Yeah, and if you think about the overall plan and how it all fits together, like, you have Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, like, there's no true nose tackle involved there, but there's a lot of investment involved there. So the fact that your 2 biggest moves you made this offseason from a resources standpoint, I think were inarguably re-signing Leonard Williams and using a first-round pick on Byron Murphy. And the fact that at the end of all of that, your main takeaway is, man, we could really still use another defensive tackle. That's concerning. And I think that I understood wanting to go get a guy like Murphy just because you could make an argument that he was the most disruptive front 7 player in the entire draft. And if you're just wanting to stockpile talented players in that area, it makes sense. But it still left this team without a bigger sort of presence, a bigger run stuffing sort of presence up front. And I think that you've seen that, and you've seen the results of that a little bit.
We were talking to Robert Mays of the Athletic Football Show, presented by Pagliacci Pizza. Make sure you go to hello.pagliacci.com/hawk-blogger. The link is in the description of the video. Sign up for all the deals on Pagliacci Pizza. Robert, I don't know what your coping, habits are after a frustrating loss. Like for me, it's absolutely food. So it was pizza and salad and ice cream. Like I blew through a lot of calories last night. So Pagliacci, thank you for comforting me through a tough night. Let's talk about the other side. So we're talking about personnel. Offensive line, perennial problem for the Seahawks. And John Schneider infamously, and I almost certain will recant these words next time he gets a chance to, said interior offensive linemen are overpaid and underdrafted. Those are words that came out of his mouth this offseason, and then went and followed suit by saying, okay, I'm going to sign Laken Tomlinson to a cheap deal. I'm going to go into the season with Olu Oluwatimi, my 5th round pick as a center, and Nick Harris. I'm going to not draft a guard until the 3rd round. And now you've got what's a pretty disastrous offensive line again. We've seen some other teams take a very different approach this offseason. We talked about the Rams a little bit, the Panthers, Giants, Jets, like a bunch of teams invested heavily in their offensive line this offseason. Is there a team that you think it's as simple as, just go out and spend and get a good player and that's what you got to do? Or how are some of these teams faring having spent that money in this offseason on their offensive lines?
I think that it's a matter of I think you have to collectively do it. Like, I think the team that jumps out to me that really remade their offensive line quickly is what the Chiefs did the year after losing to the Bucs in that Super Bowl. And it's not as simple as we're going to spend a ton of money on 3 new starters. They spent a ton of money on 1 new starter. They drafted a center in the 2nd round, and then they got lucky with Trey Smith in the 6th round, but they were chipping away at options for the interior of their offensive line. I think you have to consistently be taking dice rolls along with potentially 1 swing in free agency and maybe drafting a guy in the first couple rounds that you think this player is a day 1 starter for me. And I think that's what you typically see with these teams that are able to turn around those units pretty quickly. It's a combination of 1 swing in free agency, but also making a pretty conscious effort to seek out players high in the draft. And I think that if you're going to remake your unit fast, that's typically how you have to do it, is by doing it on multiple different fronts.
If you had an opportunity to sit down with Mike McDonald, Ryan Grubb, John Schneider, any of them this week, and just get a no holds barred, off the record conversation, what would you want to know? Like, what are you curious about what's going on in their minds right now?
I would honestly just be curious to ask them, why do you think this is happening? Like, what do you think the main issue here is now? And I would just queue up plays. It's like, why would you play this way? What is the solution to stop this from happening? And just hear what their answer would be. I mean, nothing crazy. I mean, it's just on a very simple level, I'm wondering how they would diagnose what the problems are and where they think what the potential solutions might be.
When you've talked to coaches other places, what stood out to you about coaches that have been able to turn around, kind of a free-falling team or a team that's going through a real challenging spell?
That's a good question. I think it requires a lot of self-awareness and honesty. I think that would probably be the number one thing that I would say. In order to fix a problem, you have to acknowledge that a problem exists. And so coaches, I think, that have done a really good job of taking a sober look at where their issues are. And oftentimes that's in an off season, right? It's like, all right, these are our issues structurally. How can we maybe approach this in a slightly different way to account for this problem and potentially maintain our play in areas where we have some strengths? And so that discussion of what it looks like and saying, okay, these are where our issues are. How are we going to fix this? I think being really honest and realistic about what those things are, that's the first necessary step in any of this.
One of the things I'm curious about is when there's this many things going wrong and it feels like there's nothing specifically that you can like hang your hat on or say, okay, at least this is going right, or at least we've made progress here. You start to wonder if the coaches are in over their heads and what's the evidence that they're not. And now in other situations, it can be that the coach has been there for a while and you've been able to see them go through these situations. So you're like, okay, this is a unique moment for the Seahawks right now. You don't have that track record with Mike Macdonald. You don't have that track record with Ryan Grubb. You don't have that track record with Aden Dirty. And so we talked about this going into the year, Robert, that this was not just a new regime. It was kind of an experiment of kind of a quote all-star coaching staff that had not worked together even. So not only are they having to prove themselves and getting confidence in themselves, they're having to do that with each other. And so like, are you starting to have questions about whether this experiment may not work from a coaching perspective, or are you still someone who believes that Mike Macdonald's a guy that's going to figure this out?
Yeah, I think you'd be silly not to have questions about whether this is going to work when you think about how many issues the defense has had over the first half of the season and the fact that they're consistently some of the same issues even as they've gotten healthier. And we see this all over the league. I think that continuity on a staff, when you're able to work with guys that you've worked with in the past, you know where the bodies are buried a little bit. Like, you know where and how to fix your problems because it's a process that you've been through multiple different times. And you have guys that are familiar with the mechanics of your system, right? So let's go to Baltimore, for example, last year, or I'm trying to think of a better example.
Even a place, not a bad one.
Yeah, the Rams have had a decent amount of turnover, though.
That's
the Rams
true.
have had a decent amount of staff defensive turnover. I think that, a place like Pittsburgh, right, where you have Terrell Austin, who's been there for a really long time as a defensive coordinator, and you have Mike Tomlin and a lot of their assistants. I think there's been a decent amount of continuity there. You could easily look at something that's going wrong and be like, all right, well, how have we tried to fix this in the past? What has our trial and error process looked like? Where have we had missteps, and maybe how can we avoid that this time? There's none of that shared history with how the Seahawks are trying to solve problems right now. And for somebody, I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, for somebody like the defensive coordinator who came over from Dallas,
Aden Dirty,
he has no history in this system, period. So there isn't even a backlog of like, oh, we didn't work together. This is how we would have solved this when I ran this sort of defense 3 or 4 years ago. He's still probably learning what the weak points in this system look like, let alone how to account for them over the course of an entire season. So it's not necessarily surprising. And in hindsight, maybe we should have been able to expect something like this, but I'm not shocked that it feels like they're chasing a little bit right now, considering the makeup of who's trying to solve these problems.
So one of the things that's a little confusing to me, and check me on this if I'm wrong, but I look in and see, having gone through the Pete Carroll system and seeing that proliferate throughout the league and it fall on its face everywhere but here, largely because it didn't have the same personnel that the Seahawks had for the LOB. You look around for Mike Macdonald and all the Mike Macdonald derivations out there right now. You look at the Chargers, you look at the Titans, you look at the Dolphins, look at some of the places where his fingerprints are on what's going on. Those teams seem to have lesser personnel and better results. Am I off on that?
No, I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I don't know if they have lesser personnel necessarily. I think the Chargers probably do. And I think that the job Jesse Minter has done there is probably in the conversation for the most impressive defensive coordinating jobs in the NFL this year, along with Brian Flores and a couple other people. I think what Bernard Wilson has been able to do in Tennessee absolutely is impressive. So even if the personnel, even if we want to concede that it's probably on the same level, the fact that those defenses feel like they found their footing in year one of new coordinators, and this defense still feels like it's spinning its wheels a little bit, I do think that that's notable. Yeah.
And, there's kind of a two-sided aspect to that, in that one side, it's like, all right, well, so the system and the principles seem to be sound and seem to have traction. So that's good. But the fact that it's not showing up here, I think for me, points back to the players and points back to the personnel. I don't think Mike Macdonald has forgotten how to coach his scheme. And I don't think that his scheme seems to not be effective. So what does this say potentially about who Devin Witherspoon is, who, Byron Murphy is, who Boye Mafe, Derek Hall, all these other players are that I think we had some reason to believe are young core of this team? That's where I end up having some bigger concerns because, Robert, when you have this kind of adversity, a lot of attention points to the coaches, as it should, But I often just look at the players, like who is the player that makes that one play, even if it's in a lost cause game, but they make that one high effort play or one flash play that shows that they are in the fight. Who is that one player that when things are teetering on the edge, rises up and makes a play that shows that they are a unique talent on the field? And I didn't see that in Detroit. I didn't see it against the Giants. I didn't see it against the 49ers, and I didn't see it against the Bills. So who is it on this team for the Seahawks? And is that the biggest concern, is that they don't have that guy or that set of guys that will stop the spiraling when it's happening during a game?
It's a great question. And I think that I would probably go with the pass rush. It would have been my answer after watching that Atlanta game. But to see them kind of disappear in this game, that's the concerning part, is that you're really running out of things to hang your hat on. And I thought it was going to be that group up front, because it really did seem like when you combine all of those skill sets together, it's like, all right, there's something there, right? Like you have a power rusher, you got a bendy guy in Mafe, you got guys on the interior. Like, can this be a unit that is consistently taking over games? And the fact that they can just disappear for an entire game like they did yesterday, I think there are reasons for that, right? Like the Bills use 6 offensive linemen so often throughout that game. They're really trying to spread things out. Like they're doing everything they can, I think, to make it hard on that position group specifically, because they knew if we can take them out of the game, that the rest of this team and the rest of the back seven isn't something that we have to worry about. So are there going to be games where a team has a really pointed, specific sort of game plan to defang the Maffes and the Derek Halls of the world? And if that happens, is the rest of the defense going to collapse? And I think that our early returns for what this year looks like is, yes, if they're not making splash plays with the pass rush, then down to down, this is going to be a unit that struggles to stop people.
Robert, I'll give you 2 numbers that you'll potentially be amused by about the Seahawks offensive line as we start to wrap here. But one, would you believe that yesterday was the lowest pressure rate that the Seahawks offensive line has surrendered on the season?
Here's the reason I would believe that. It's because I thought the Seahawks actually moved the ball fairly efficiently through the air yesterday. They just couldn't get out of their own way like 6 different times in that game. The idea that you get down to I think it was the 1 yard line both times, or it was at least inside the 3.
Yes, it was inside the 3.
The fact that you're inside the 3 twice, and you walk away from that with a snap over somebody's head, your quarterback gets stepped on. Later in the game, you get a tipped ball interception to a defensive lineman. We could keep going. Gino throws the ball at a defensive player and gets a taunting penalty on a scramble that should have given them life on 3rd down. Early in the game, you get a strip and a fumble. Josh Allen kicks the ball, and they somehow get a 1st down on that play. So I think that for me, the offense was more about, I can't believe you keep finding new ways to do ridiculous things and embarrass yourself, rather than there was something really wrong with how they were trying to move the ball down to down.
I think that the Seahawks could have played that game with their pants around their ankles for the whole game, and it would have been less embarrassing than what we saw for a lot of that, especially the first half. The other number I'll leave you with, the Seahawks rushing offense managed negative 0.7 EPA per run for the game, which is the 3rd worst rushing performance by any team in the NFL all year. So that hopefully is less surprising given what we saw in that game. So, last thing I'll ask you about, Robert, before I release you from the torture, which is talking about this 2024 Seahawks team.
Listen, we both had a bad 24 hours. So you can't hurt me anymore. You can't kill a dead man.
Let's talk about this Rams matchup. You know the Rams well. You know that that was a huge, great performance for them. The Seahawks have 1 week to kind of get themselves righted. Do you see a path? DK Metcalf should be back. Do you see a path for the Seahawks to win this game against the Rams?
Yeah, I do. I think that the Rams defense is still a unit that you can get after a little bit. I think they've found themselves a little bit on the back end with some of the personnel changes that they've made, by taking Trey White out of the lineup and, slot. I think it's Kobe Durant and Darius Williams are playing their outside corner spots. I think that has been nice for them. And I think that their front has really come along. And I think you're really starting to see the flashes of what that group is capable of with Jared Verse and Byron Young and some of the young defensive tackles that they had. But I think overall, this is still a unit that you can move the ball against, you can find explosives against. So I think that the best path is trying to win a fairly high scoring game, because I think on the other side of the ball, it's probably going to be a struggle. Like what this Rams offense can be when they have both of those receivers back and their offensive line is now getting healthier. I think we saw that last week against Minnesota. This is a defense that had given trouble to pretty much every single offense they'd faced outside of a Detroit offense that's probably the best in the NFL. And the Rams moved the ball pretty much at will. And I think that the biggest thing that I saw, I just thought that Sean McVay called a phenomenal game. Mm-hmm. And I think that you really see what he's able to do when he has confidence in the pieces around him. And it's like, all right, I have my full arsenal of guys. We can be whatever I want. Watch me cook. And so them getting back to that place where you feel the confidence start to build a little bit, I think that's potentially bad for the other teams in the NFC West.
That is Robert Mays of the Athletic Football Show. Robert, what should people be looking for from the Athletic and from you coming up this week?
We got a fun show midweek this week. JT O'Sullivan is going to join me to talk about the rookie quarterbacks halfway through their first seasons and just what we've seen from them. He does such a great job breaking down the position, and he's done a lot of work on Caleb and Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, Drake May, all those guys. So excited to have that discussion with JT, and then we'll be back with our Week 9 preview a little bit later in the week.
Amazing. That is Robert Mays of the Athletic Football Show, presented by Pagliacci Pizza each and every Monday. Robert, have a great rest of your week, man.
Sounds good. You too. Talk to you soon.
All right. That was Robert Mays. And if you haven't already ordered a Pagliacci Pizza, you should. You won't regret it. I certainly have not. And man, you can get great deals if you go to the link in the description of the video, hello.pagliacci.com/hawk-blogger will get you access to great special deals from Pagliacci Pizza. And a lot there to talk about from Robert, and appreciate everyone who's given the show a like and click subscribe. I'd appreciate you doing that if you haven't. Just takes you a second to do it. Got a bunch of things in chat I want to get to, and then I'm going to play a voicemail. We're going to do a voicemail. We got some other stuff to talk about. So let me first catch up here. We've got Drew, who has gifted 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. Thank you so much, Drew, for being generous, even during down times. Love to see it. If you get one of those free memberships, consider giving it. Drew gave another 10 free Hawk Blogger memberships. Then Moshi gave a Hawk Blogger membership, Moshi Moss, and Hawks fan Mattman gave 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. So thank you to Drew for kicking us off, Moshi for participating, and Matt for doing it as well. If you get one of these free memberships, consider giving one. Really, really appreciate it. Got a super chat from PGZ206, says the old Tariq showed up. Very disappointing. You know, I've heard this from folks, and I have not had a chance to go back and watch the tape, but listening to Mike McDonald this morning on his radio show, talked about edge containment, and I have a feeling, looking at the missed tackle numbers, Witherspoon and Woolen both had 3 missed tackles from what I saw, I think. So I'm guessing that might be where this is showing up, that he had a bad tackling game, which would be unfortunate. And again, would be something essentially newish. So Mike McDonald's got to be tearing out his hair. Jack Turner with a super chat says, John Schneider should have been fired with Pete. We need a new set of eyes and a new direction. I like Mike McDonald, but the lack of meaningful progress is concerning. Look, I mean, I am out there publicly about, I am a fan of John Schneider's as a person and as a GM. I'm a fan of Mike McDonald. I'm a fan of Ryan Grubbs. I'm in with this team. So, you know, people are going to have free reign to take shots on me, make fun of my takes, whatever. I don't care, because I'm always going to have the takes I take regardless of outside perspective. That said, when things are going the way they're going right now, everybody's fair game. Ownership's fair game. Everybody is fair game. I think fans are fair game, to be honest. We'll talk about this a little bit more. I don't think it's fans' fault at all. But I don't know that anybody is doing their best work this season. Let's put it that way. I don't think the players are doing their best work. I don't think the coaches are doing their best work. I don't think the front office is doing their best work, ownership or fans. Like, it's not a great look right now in Seattle for what's going on here. And I'm here for it either way. I'm going to be here every friggin' day chronicling what's going on and looking for reason to chart a path from this low nadir to a peak that hopefully we can see in the horizon soon. Because right now, it's bleak. It's bleak. And I think that I could blow sunshine and say, oh man, we're 1 week removed from blowing out the Falcons, and the Falcons just went down and they beat the Bucks, and Kirk Cousins threw 4 touchdowns, and we really, we made him look silly. All those things are true. I absolutely think the Seahawks can beat the Rams this week. The Rams are not the Bills. They're not the Lions. They're not the 49ers. But I could also absolutely see the Seahawks not being able to stop the run, Kyron Williams blowing up every tackle, getting 8 yards a carry, and nothing else really mattering. And the offensive line getting dominated by a good pass rushing team, and them not being able to get the run going because they haven't been able to get the run going. And you're looking at your 4th straight loss at home. So that's where the team is. That's where the team is. And the only thing that can change that is the guys in that locker room. And I don't even think it's a matter of the coaching can do it. Sure, there's situations where coaches can reach players in certain ways and get them out of a spiral and get them to play in a specific way that gets them at their best. 100%. Coaches have responsibility and accountability. End of the day, I mean, you guys have all played. Well, I don't know if you all played sports. I played a bunch of sports. I think a lot of you have played sports. Someone can tell you what to do. Basketball is a great example of this for me. There's so many times where a coach would tell me, okay, here's how to run the play. You set the screen here, you roll there, you cut to this, you make the pass here. How many times does the play actually develop exactly as it's supposed to on the court? Very rarely. And not only that, but how many times are the players that run the play exactly as it's designed the ones that make a difference? Very rarely. This is one of my biggest aha moments as an athlete. And it came in basketball, varsity basketball, where I was so focused on running the plays as designed. And I'd there'd be our best players would freelance. And they would take it off the dribble on a play where it was supposed to be a pass here, and they would just take it to the hole, or they'd take a jump shot where it wasn't supposed to be necessarily designed to do. But they were the most talented players, and they made plays. They put points on the board. Ultimately, it is your players and the decisions they make on the field and how they play the sport that decide whether or not you're good or you're not. And right now, the players are not doing it. They're not doing it. And I got to say, as a huge Geno Smith fan, it was a big red flag for me when he mentioned that the Bills fans traveled and it felt like a road game. That to me sounded like sour grapes about the fans and a shot across the bow at the fans. I am telling you right now, that is not a road you want to walk on. You want the fans to come to the stadium. You want the fans to pay their top dollar instead of opposing fans paying their top dollar. Play a fucking good game. Be worth our money. Be worth our time. Be worth the childcare that we have to set up to get to the event. Be worth the acrimony of leaving our spouses to deal with things while we go to watch a sporting event. Be worth us screaming louder than the opposing fans because you are earning it. Do not walk down that road. So this is a very fragile moment for this franchise, and they better tread lightly, because the only way around this is through it. Like, you better turn it around this week. And I don't mean that has to be a win. Now, realistically, it better be. But you better friggin' show up. And it better not be the exact same friggin' problems that we've been washing for weeks on end. It's pretty simple. Byron Masterson with a super chat says, do we still feel good about Witherspoon? Not right now. No, we don't feel good about Witherspoon right now. So, I mean, I wrote about that in my morning after column today. Coming off that Atlanta game, I looked at the young core for the Seahawks on defense, and I'm like, all right, now let's see these guys cook. Let's see how they can do against a good Bills offensive line, against a great quarterback that has weapons, that has a good running game. Let's see if this front seven can really come to life. Oh my God. Was that the most disappointing part of this game? Yeah, for me it was. Like 11 pressures. I think the lowest amount of pressures they've had all year. As Robert Mays mentioned, getting washed off the ball. I just, I don't love it. I don't love it. Let's listen to a voicemail, and I think I remember what this one's about. It'll be a topic we've actually kind of covered already, but in order to hear it, first we got to play the jingle.
Time to rise and shine, it's clear. HB Mornings voicemails here. Lay and laugh, let go of fear. Start your day with cheer, my dear.
All right, today's voicemail comes from Chandler, and here it is.
Hi guys, it's Chandler. I'll try and make this as short as possible, even though this is something I really want to talk about. If it makes it on the show, again, love you guys, forever grateful. You guys are awesome. Thank you. I'm concerned about this fan base. What has happened to us? Seattle and Lumen Field, CenturyLink, Quest, whatever, used to be the place where opponents come to die. I'm 25 years old. I grew up in my early high school, middle school years of the LOB being at our best, and opposing teams not being able to do anything in Seattle because of what our fans can do and just how good our team was. Obviously, I understand that defense was incredible, but our stadium was next level as well. We were tit for tat with some of the loudest and most craziest atmospheres in the entire world, and we are a shell of that right now. I'm watching the Bills game today, and when Seattle's on offense, it's loud. It is noticeably loud because of how many Bills fans are there. The Niners game on Thursday night, 10 to 12 rows up the entire stadium everywhere are just it's a sea of red, and it's so sad to see. It's so freaking sad. I don't know what people's reasons are for not being as bought in. I understand the team right now is not very good. Brian's right. We don't belong on the field with actual contenders right now, and we're not one. And we have a new head coach, and I will believe in Mac until he figures it out, but he's not good right now either. So I understand on the field there's not a whole lot to get excited about. But Seattle has never been the place where it's become a cakewalk. And it no longer matters if teams are playing on the road in Seattle because it doesn't have any kind of impact on the game at all. And it's really sad to see. This team right now has problems. And if we're going to have problems for the next couple of years until either the front office, the coaching, or the players figure it out, or all three, hopefully, a problem that we can never have again is our home building and our fan base. Because we have some of the best fans in the entire world. And it's really sad to see what this kind of year has become in regards to.
All right. I think we got it there from Chandler. If you want to leave a voicemail, by the way, just record something on a voice memo on your phone, attach it to an email, send it to me at brian@hawkblogger.com, and I will play it and respond to it. It can be on this show. It can be with one of my guests. It can be, again, it doesn't have to be about football. It can be about life. It can be about work. It can be about hiking. It can be about food. It can be a joke, whatever you want. So attach it to an email at brian@hawkblogger.com. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the answer here because I'm actually working on an article on this. I'm going to be talking to a bunch of season ticket holders today. I've been doing research on this for a few weeks now. I'm going to give the Seahawks an opportunity to have some comment on this should they want to. But it is on one side, it's pretty straightforward that fans are going to follow the product on the field. And if you want an engaged fan base, winning is the way to do it. Like, that's the reality. On the other hand, I've been a Seahawks fan for decades, 40 years or whatever it's been. The team hasn't always been good. And there still was a love affair with the Seahawks in general. And something's different right now. And I think that I have some ideas about what it is, but I don't want to presuppose because I'm doing the research. I'm asking other people. I'm going to talk to folks. And I would just say, keep an eye on hawkblogger.com. I'm going to publish an article. I'm going to put a lot of work into it. And you'll see some answers there, at least what I find. And also some ideas I have for, I think, maybe how to change things, because I don't believe this is actually just a Seahawks thing. It's going to be a little harder for me to get the research I want for other teams, but I have some anecdotal evidence that suggests it may not be just a Seahawks thing going on. So appreciate the voicemail. Thank you for leaving it, Chandler, and thanks to everyone else that leaves voicemails. So where do we go from here, folks? Well, I'll tell you what. Mike McDonald this morning on his radio show said I think his quote was, I wrote it down. I want to make sure I get it right because it was telling. He said there aren't a lot of bright spots. He was given an opportunity to say, like, hey, is the Josh Jobe interception, was that at least a bright spot? And his like, not really. I mean, there just aren't a lot of bright spots. And coach is frustrated, as you'd expect him to be. He's determined, as you'd expect him to be. And this is, we're 8 games in. We are 8 games in. There's no like early in the season stuff. There's no health stuff. I mean, yes, there's some new players coming in and out, but either guys are doing their jobs well or they're not. And I'm curious if we're going to start seeing some lineup changes. There was some hints, this is not related to yesterday, but coach mentioned that Trey Brown was available and active yesterday, had less practice. But I almost got the impression that he's not the starter anymore, that Josh Jobe may be the starter. That would be something to keep an eye on. I wonder who else might lose their jobs. Like, do you start shuffling guys on the line? These are wild things to suggest, but like on defense, does Jamie Sheriff start getting reps? I don't think he should. I don't think that's going to solve anything, but it's not necessarily a matter of who the player is that's coming in. It's what's the message to the guy who's sitting down. That's one. 2, you got to be careful as a coach. When you sit someone down, they may never stand up again. Like, you might learn something about someone if that's the case, but there are plenty of very good players who you will lose forever if you sit them. Like, I don't think it would go well for like DK Metcalf, for example. If you sat DK Metcalf, I don't know that you'd ever have him back. So I'm not saying you should sit DK Metcalf, by the way. I'm just saying, as an example, I'm not sure that all players respond the way you'd hope to losing their playing time on the field. But I do wonder if this week you start to see some guys lose their jobs. That's one of the only like levers you've got as a coach to truly motivate these players to do something that they haven't been doing. I wonder if you're going to see more padded practice or, anything else there. You heard from Robert there's not a lot of schemes that can make up for your defensive lineman getting pushed 5 yards downfield. So I don't know that moving Julian Love into the box is your answer, right? So it's tough. It's a tough moment. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to try to spin it to the positive. It's a tough moment. I see from Hawks fan Matt Man that D. Williams should lose his job. I think that's pretty clear. They should be trying, like he absolutely has done enough to lose that job, and they should be bringing someone else in just to catch the punts. They don't even have to return them. Just catch it and catch it reliably. At this point, you got to make that change. So it is a make or break week for the Seahawks team. And I am curious to see what comes of it. I will be at the VMAC later today talking to the coach. I've got some questions I want to ask him. I think this is going to be a rough week talking to the coach. I think it's going to be a rough week talking to the players in that locker room. I don't think most people are going to want to talk to the media, and that's okay. But they could all stay silent all week for all I care. What I care about is that the product is different this coming Sunday than what it's been for the last 3 home games. Think about that. Think about the Giants, the 49ers, and the Bills. Those are arguably your 3 worst games of the season. They all came at home. And they all came in a row. So, yeah, it's time to change that. Defend your home field. Show some pride. And demonstrate some investment in what's going on here. Because right now, it does feel more like a bunch of individuals than it does like a high-functioning team. So there's work to be done. There's motivation to be derived. I think there's players that need to lead. Everyone's going to be looking at coaching, and I get it. For me, who are the players? Who are the players that are changing this team? Because right now, I'm just not seeing it. And that's the part that's most disappointing. All right, folks. Thank you to everybody that tuned in. If you haven't already given the show a like and click subscribe, please do. Make sure you go to the link in the description of the video to get your special Pagliacci deals. hello.pagliacci.com/hawk-blogger will get you access to all those special deals. Thank you to everybody that signed up. Not signed up. Thank you to everybody who went to JK Boots and used code HawkBlogger. We have triggered. This is a thing to feel really good about. They all got 10% off their purchase at JK Boots. Those purchases go to a company that's based in Spokane. It's a local company, mom and pop shop. They get entered for a chance to get a pair of Seahawks themed boots. But maybe for me, most importantly, we are going to now give away a pair of boots to a wildland firefighter that fights fires in the Pacific Northwest in our forests. For free. We're giving them a pair away because all of you have used code HawkBlogger and bought a pair of JK Boots. I'm working with JK Boots on what our next charitable milestone will be, because I'd love to continue giving more boots away to people that need them and continue making this a win-win-win. If you have not already, use code HawkBlogger to get your 10% off and your chance to win another pair of Seahawks themed boots, as well as contribute towards our next charitable milestone. So good stuff coming. And I appreciate all of you for tuning in today. Have as good of a day as you can the rest of the day. Treat each other well. Do something nice for somebody, and find some self-care. All right. Until then, I'm Brian Emhouse. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at HawkBlogger. This has been episode 218 of HawkBlogger Mornings. Take care.